I think something really significant happened yesterday. And when you couple it with the local election results of the previous week, it, I think, sounds a very, very loud alarm bell for the Labour Party, for the Labour government. I'm not quite sure where I'm going at the moment with this. So bear with. Right, and we'll work towards something that we can explore together. I can tell you now that it is essentially going to involve the question of what Labour has to do differently to either defuse or detoxify debates that circle almost exclusively now around immigration. There's one rather obvious answer to that question. But there is one rather obvious problem with it as well. So that I think is going to be the central thrust of where we'll end up in 15 minutes or so, 10 minutes or so. Well, who am I kidding? 25 minutes? No, 10 to 12 minutes or so. That is going to be the central thrust. So you could get in early if you want, but I'd probably wait just a second. Because what happened yesterday that really stayed with me on my way home, and that doesn't always happen. Sometimes I am capable of wandering out of the studio and not really thinking about anything news related for at least a few hours. But some days I just have the sense of an ungnawed bone banging around in my brain, and something that I just want to carry on. I want to keep worrying a knot, as it were, in the hope of untying it. And I couldn't quite pin down what it was. There's sort of three strands to this knot. One is the surge that Nigel Farage's latest outfit is currently enjoying. One is, and that is, of course, caught up in the results last week. One is the response to the trade deal that was announced yesterday. And the third is a sort of combination of stories, whether it's today's story about demanding that foreign-born workers pass special English tests before they're allowed to come here, or looking at the bill for housing asylum seekers, or whatever it is, whatever the story is that is very much kindling for the fires of unhappiness that burn in this country around the issue of immigration. For good or for ill, they burn. No one can deny that. So those three strands knit together. And what I think was really significant yesterday was that the absolute dishonesty of one wing of what I would loosely describe as Brexiters, the absolute dishonesty became absolutely crystal clear, because it was a fascinating schism in the Brexit-supporting lobby, as it were. You had two very distinct responses to the UK-India trade deal that was announced yesterday, one of which was honest and involved people who I hold in very, very low regard generally, because I think that supporting Brexit was an act of incredible national shame. But if you were to examine it in isolation, or if you were to simply accept that this is a deal that is done in the world that we inhabit, not the world that we wish we inhabited. You see what I mean? This is the world that we live in. Brexit has happened. There is no undoing it. Therefore, the world that we actually inhabit, examine the UK-India trade deal through the lens of the world that we actually inhabit, and it's a cracking piece of work. And the list of people who have come out to say that almost reads like a list of the usual suspects for being wrong about everything historically. But on this occasion, they are right. So everybody from Oliver Dowden to Daniel Hannan to Jacob Rees-Mogg talking about what has been achieved, and also pointing out that the national insurance dispensation that appeared on many front pages yesterday is absolutely commonplace. In fact, the coalition, the Lib Dem and the Tory coalition in 2012 signed a similar deal with Chile that offered a 5-year exemption from social security contributions. So it is categorically not the case that any two-tier system has been introduced. But here's the thing, you see, the truth doesn't matter. And both Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage demonstrated yesterday that there is no lie too base for them to pursue. So I found this absolutely fascinating. Yesterday should have been the day that people who were in favour of Brexit allowed themselves a pat on the back. And, I mean, there are two reasons why they wouldn't do that. One is perhaps generous, from my point of view, and one is perhaps less generous. Reason number one would be that they know it is such an almighty mess that even doing a lap of honour for this relatively small beer is a futile exercise. The people who were the loudest champions of Brexit were the first to demand that we stop talking about it, which tells you everything you need to know about how successful it's been. So Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage telling lies about it being some sort of two-tier system, Farage inevitably going further and claiming that it somehow undercuts British workers, which is either profoundly ignorant or deliberately provocative or quite possibly both, is proof, perhaps, that no one's going to be making any big claims about Brexit ever again. Because even this deal, which is a genuine benefit of Brexit, even this deal does so little to undo the damage that Brexit has done economically that to do a lap of honour about it would be ridiculous. Which leaves you with the other analysis of it, in which it is somewhat uglier than that. So if we can bring a race-based grievance into the conversation, that is now a bigger electoral tool than the Brexit legacy. So Farage's calculation in this studio actually yesterday was bring a race-based grievance into the conversation, even if it's completely untrue, and tell people that they are going to be undercut by Indians, that they're somehow going to get a worse deal than Indians, which isn't true because the Indian workers brought here by their employers will continue to pay their contributions back in India. So it's a blatant lie or an act of epic ignorance. And with Farage, of course, it's always impossible to know the difference. And it's always possible that it is both a blatant lie and an act of epic ignorance. But the race-based grievance prioritised even over the opportunity to claim a Brexit win. You see why I find that so fascinating. I wouldn't have predicted this, even as a relatively reliable chronicler of all of these characters responsible for breaking Britain, to prioritise the race-based grievance over the actual Brexit win. So Jacob Rees-Mogg, Daniel Hannan, Oliver Dowden, all the rest of them, they behaved honourably yesterday. They're not honourable men necessarily, and they're not yet ready to admit that Brexit was an absolute disaster, but the honourable course yesterday was to point out two or three things. One, this deal with India could not have been signed were we still members of the European Union. Two, it delivers an estimated £5 billion boost to our international trade. And three, it is actually a cause for celebration. They have got it over the line. The last government started negotiating it. Kemi Badenoch has once again put her foot in her mouth by claiming that she had refused to sign up to some of the things that Labour has signed up for. A senior Indian official telling the Financial Times that she's talking absolute rubbish, which is a fairly reliable description of Kemi Badenoch on any day of any year, but it was particularly pertinent yesterday. So the honourable men, and that's not a phrase I've ever used to describe any of these people before, Dowden, Rees-Mogg, Hannan, and a lot of others as well. Also, the list of business people making the case for this being good, everywhere from textiles and clothing, even through to farming. Farmers have been fairly well looked after by it. The professor of international trade policy at Aston University described it as an ambitious and momentous deal. But why would you listen to a professor of international trade policy at Aston University when you can listen to Dave down the Dog and Duck or your Auntie Doris on Facebook, or, of course, their patron saint, Nigel Farage? So, and Steve Baker, also hard man of Brexit. Steve Baker, an honourable man in the context of this moment, because they're doing the pat on the back for the Brexit benefit, okay? But Farage and Badenoch didn't. They've gone for the race-based grievance. They've gone for the, oh, look, those Indians getting something that you don't get. Ooh, yeah, ooh, dear Indians, eh? Oof. And, you know, he's very good at it. She's less good at it. But he's very good at it. And he is allowed, for reasons I still don't fully grasp, he's allowed to get away with it in almost every studio in the land. Oh, Indians getting something you don't get. Yeah, Keir Starmer is looking after the Indians. He's not looking after you. And that brings us to a really important question, which is, how does Keir Starmer address this problem? And the problem isn't just about immigration or foreigners or Indians or race-based grievances. It's about a widespread perception that this government, the left in general, actually, because I think this holds true for Joe Biden as well, or the Democrats and their role in bringing Donald Trump to power, which one American commentator, James Carville, was in London discussing yesterday and credited the Democrats with about 75% responsibility for Donald Trump's electoral success. And he has a point. But bringing it back to Britain, I think that the concept of the queue is crucial to understanding everything that's happened in British politics since 2015, 2016. Okay? The idea that we are queuing up, you and me, might not have a lot in common, but we play by the rules. We are waiting in line for our turn. We have kept our side of the bargain. This isn't quite social contract stuff. It's more a rat race. We are waiting in line, and we're trying. We are. I don't like the language of strivers and shirkers, but we are conscious of the relationship that we have with work. We either with our employer or, if we're self-employed, with the work that we do. We have expectations of the relationship between effort and reward. And I think that this is where Labour and the Democrats have got an almost identical problem. There is a widespread perception that the Labour government is not doing anything for people in that queue. And the reason why race-based grievances are so effective, even if they're completely dishonest, as almost all of them are, is because it adds to the idea that people are being allowed to push in front of you, or people are getting something that you're not getting. So we are going to be, I'm afraid, talking about immigration in this country pretty much constantly until the next election, because a genie was let out of the bottle during the Brexit debate, and nobody is going to be able to get it back in again. Enormous numbers of people voting because they believe lies about immigration. And that problem gets worse. It gets bigger. Well, I mean, incredibly, by doing Brexit, you stopped the flow of young European workers into this country who were most likely, having done a shift, to go back to their country of origin. And you massively increased the flow of older, less qualified people from much further away who come here more likely permanently and have dependents with them as well. That's a direct consequence of Brexit. But you won't hear any of the Brexiters apologising to their base for that. You'll hear them blaming Keir Starmer. And I haven't got the first idea how he addresses this problem. I'd see the front page of The Guardian this morning, and they talk about Labour MPs being in a fight of their lives when it comes to reform and Nigel Farage. They've ramped up pressure on the Treasury by calling for an economic reset after Reform UK's surge in the local elections last week, warning that the economy is stuck in a doom loop. So they're kind of betting the house on making us feel a bit better off. That's why the prioritisation of these trade deals and workers' rights as well, which hasn't had anything like the coverage that it deserves and it should have received. But the simple question of how on earth he battles this sense that he's not helping you. And he's possibly hurting you, or he's hurting people that you care about, like the disabled people or the pensioners or the people that are perceived as being penalised. How can Labour, because I'm not sure they can, how can Labour prove to the electorate that they are helping them? Because the offer from the other side isn't that we're going to help you. The offer from the other side is all these foreigners are taking stuff and we're going to really clamp down on them, and then you will somehow end up better off. It's an evil lie, but it can get you all the way to the White House and it can get you all the way to Downing Street. It's all about foreigners, these Indians getting deals at the British. It doesn't matter whether it's true or not. It's already got halfway around the world, and the Labour's communications department was more or less powerless to stop it. Good piece in the newspaper by their chief political commentator, Kitty Donaldson, under the headline, "Labour loses control of the narrative on a good news deal." And the good news deal is a matter of fact. The race-based grievance about Indians getting something you're not getting is an emotive lie. So I did warn you in advance that I wasn't quite sure where I was going. But I think we're going here. The Lib Dems have also been very disingenuous on the trade deal as well. It's not just Brexiters, it's not just Badenoch, it's not just Farage, and I hope it's not going to become a tradition on this programme for me to cite the likes of Rees-Mogg, Dowden and Hannan and hard man of Brexit Steve Baker as reliable arbiters. But what can they do? How can they make you feel that they care about you? 0345 6060973. What would you do? And I don't. So there's two ways into this. You can either be the political guru and sort of do it from the outside, describing what tactics you think they should adopt, or you can be the very personal. You can do it from the inside and say what would actually appeal to you. Because you're going to get offered one thing effectively by Farage and his mates. You're going to get offered anti-immigrant rhetoric, anti-immigration rhetoric, anti-asylum seekers, anti-immigrants, anti. Labour can't match them on that. The argument that they may even have tried is hideous. So you can't possibly win that while you're in power. You can only ever win a battle about who can be more horrible to immigrants when you're in opposition. What on earth can Labour do to reach people who feel that Labour is not looking after them? I really want you to ring me on this. I think it's a really important question, possibly the most important question of the electoral cycle so far, or the most important question of this year. 0345 6060 973. You can't win a fight to be meanest about immigrants. So what does Labour do to persuade the population that they care about the population or about your bit of the population?